Everyone, welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm really excited. Any day where I get to meet somebody that dear Esther Deutsch has sent my way, I'm excited. Adam Kerrigan, it's nice to have you on the show. Welcome, and would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, Jeff, super glad to be here. My name is Adam Kerrigan. I am with Net at Work. And although our company is based out of Manhattan, I'm located in Las Vegas. And, I got my start in the MSP industry back in 2009 when I founded my own company. I built that for 10 years and then sold it to my largest local competitor. I then helped them kind of stand up their mergers and acquisitions, their M&A practice. And for me, that was kind of exciting. First and foremost, because there was some dramatic changes in my own life that came about as after I sold my MSP. I lost 80 pounds. I got out of a bad marriage. I got my nights and weekends back, and I got into competitive powerlifting, which I still do to this day. But I loved seeing similar uplifts in who I consider my brothers and sisters in the industry. And so I've continued to do that work now for, I guess, going on 8 years. I now am with Net at Work. We're based out of Manhattan, as I mentioned, and we focus on managed services, but also we've got 10 other business units that cover ERP, CRM, HR information systems. And my work here is to build relationships, find great MSP owners that are interested in joining part of a larger team to simplify the lives of their clients with more products and services, provide their people with more opportunities, and really figure out what's the next chapter. M&A, if you haven't been through it, Jeff, it's a emotional just as much as a financial journey. But yeah, there's a lot there, and it's just something that I've become fascinated with.
Well, you and I are going to have a fun conversation because I'm equally fascinated. And for what it's worth, I've been on both sides of the table, and I've been the advisor at the end of the table. So I'm fascinated by what makes a good transition, and horrified by what makes a terrible transition.
Yes.
Now is a really good moment. I want to shout out to our mutual friend, Carrie Lynn Richardson. Absolutely adore Carrie Lynn. She was a guest early on the show, even though she was very adamant, I don't want to meet anyone but MSPs. And I went, okay. But I love that she's in this space doing things and helping MSPs with their sales processes. Rumor has it she's working on something new and big. I can't wait to see the reveal. But let's talk about your experience first as the seller, because that is an identity roller coaster in and of itself. So how did that process unfold for you?
Yeah, I would say in my experience, because I've talked to probably over 1,000 MSP owners on the topic of mergers and acquisitions. And part of that, I get a little bit of insight about what's driving or compelling them, right, to kind of sell, right, move on to the next chapter, if you will. And I would estimate that around 70 to 80% of owners are saying, hey, I want to go on to retirement, or my wife wants to buy an RV and kind of travel around the world, right? Or I want to do more travel. I want to step away from the business. But about 30, and so they're driving towards something, right? They've got something that they're kind of leading towards. The other maybe 20 or 30% are people that are kind of honestly running from something, right? And that's where I was. I was burned out. I was totally burned. I was not doing well, like with my health. I just wasn't where I was at, where I wanted to be in terms of overall just fitness and everything. And the stress of entrepreneurship and owner was really pressing down on me, and it was affecting, kind of my personal, my family life. And so for me, I was like, look, I want to get out from underneath this burden. And for me, that's kind of what started to drive. So when I made the decision, I kind of looked, hey, what are the options in the area? I'd formed a great relationship with the MSP that I ended up selling to here in the Las Vegas area. But I considered a couple of others, but ultimately went that direction. And for me, it was a phenomenal choice. It was a hard thing to do, but I never regretted that decision.
I love it. And for what it's worth, I'm fascinated. I used to be the annoying advisor the day somebody incorporated. I'd say, okay, let's discuss what exit looks like. And
Mm,
they're like, wait a minute, we just brought this baby into the world and you're talking about burying it. And I'm like, no, no, no. I'm talking about sending it to college. Because that's the reality is if in theory, if you're building a business, it's because you want it to last. And the best way to make sure
sure.
something lasts is to focus on the life cycle of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's the whole begin with the end in mind sort of mentality, right? And I would estimate that 99% of MSP founders are very similar to myself. We were career technicians that got tired of working for the man, right? Or somebody, and we were like, hey, I want to do this on my own, right? I've got people coming to me. I've been doing stuff on the side for years. I want to turn this into a full-time gig. And we did, right? So now instead of one boss, we got 100, right? Of course, and all the pressure that comes with that. But yeah, kind of transitioning to that route is a very common approach. I think it is helpful when people think about, hey, what is it that they're trying to achieve, right? Not just a dollar figure, but what is it that you want with your life? And that brings up honestly some tough questions, right? That can take a lot of time to really dig deep because the answer is different for every single person. And we can't, we can outsource our sales or our marketing or our ops or whatever, but we cannot outsource that internal work that we've got to do to figure out what's important to us.
I love that. And it's fascinating to me because I can always tell where somebody is in their journey by the conversation I have. There are those who they're still the technician. A friend of mine, he said, I was the guy at the keyboard. Very different discussion than somebody who's ready to start talking about legacy. Very fun, very different conversations. Now, what was one big lesson you learned in your transition that has carried forward to today? Because I guarantee there's at least one lesson you earned the hard way.
How much time do you have? um, look, I think at least the first one that is coming to mind is that every business is capped by the owner, right? And so I was investing in different areas of my business, but where I was really failing to invest in was myself. And because I became the limiting factor, that's what became essentially the bottleneck for my own stress, for my own health, for the success of the business. And I have, as I've talked to hundreds and probably 1,000 MSP owners, I find that the people that not only invest in themselves but actually invest their time and energy in peer groups are people that get perspective, right? It's very lonely at the top as a founder, as an owner, as a CEO, and even maybe our partners or spouse. They want to be there and support us, but they don't quite understand. And so surrounding ourselves with people who do understand the difficulty of all decisions rolling up, right? The pressure of making payroll, kind of that accountability 24/7, having that circle around us can really help kind of buoy us up and really help give us the insight that we fail to see. If we're living our lives kind of in the trenches, it's tough to zoom back. That's why that perspective is so important.
I love that. And I think perspective is the key word because a lot of people, and I see this all the time, and I jokingly say that the business owners value their business the highest the day they start it and the day they decide to sell it because it means so much to them. And
Yeah.
if I had a dime for every time somebody said, "Oh, it's got potential," it's like, yeah, but it's amazing how we fall in love with our little baby, and we don't want to hear, your baby's not necessarily ugly, but it's teething right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. We all want to believe our baby's the cutest.
Yeah,
And how could we not, right? We birth the thing. I think for us guys, this is probably as close as we get to, kind of delivering a baby in that way. But
yeah,
we pour ourselves into it, right? It's a reflection of us. It's an extension of our core values, right? The people we surround ourselves with, there's a good chance we're spending more time with some of them than we do our own family, right?
yeah.
And it is it is very easy to get emotionally hooked. And truly, actually, the only people that I see who can approach an M&A transaction without those emotional hooks really deeply set into them are people who've been through the process multiple times. Like they're serial entrepreneurs, they've sold multiple businesses, and they can look at it from that regard. But the 99.9% of the rest of us, it's like, how much for my left arm, right? It's a difficult experience to go through.
Yeah. How much do I value my left arm versus my right? What if it was just a finger, not the whole hand?
Correct. Yeah. Which body part would you sell first? Yeah, that's an interesting question.
It's interesting to me because I've dealt with probably not 1,000 like you, but I've dealt with a lot of them. When the owner's running away from the business, it was too big, it was too consuming. The transition usually fails because there's a gap there. But when the owner's running to something like retirement or more time with grandkids, there's more patience for transition. Have you found that in the MSP space?
Well, it's an interesting thing. Granted, I've got my own perspective. I mean, I think as I step back, I've probably been personally involved in maybe coming up on about 20 different transactions, right? And some of them had multiple owners, including a number that were husband and wife owners. And admittedly, right, I only see what I see. I don't know what's going on in their heads and their hearts and everything else. But I read a fantastic book called Transitions. And the author's name is escaping me at the moment. But in the application of M&A, a transition begins with an ending, and then there's a neutral zone, and then there's a beginning, right? So the ending is we've sold our business, and for most of us, for the 99% of us that are not serial entrepreneurs, our identity is tied up with that business, right? It's interwoven, and so there's a clear ending, and then there's this transitional, like this quicksand, like what's going on? It's this neutral zone, right? That we're navigating. We're trying to find the new normal, right? And then we have a new. It's interesting because a lot of people think, oh, hey, I'm going to retire. I'm going to go play golf. I'm going to travel more. The reality is those sort of things get old very quickly, right? We think sometimes a hobby is going to be the thing we want to go to, and it's like another book that I love called Finish Big talks about at the very ending that what they did is they interviewed like 80 entrepreneurs who sold their business. And what they found is the people who were most successful after the transaction, the one thing that they shared in common was they all found a way to continue to serve other people. And that was the key. So thinking we're just going to be able to get away from it all, that's a bit short-sighted thinking. We've really got to figure out, hey, what having done that internal work, how do I want to serve people, and then actually applying that.
I love that. And it's fascinating to me because I think people mistakenly believe they can do the things they want to do that they didn't do while they were in business. And golf is my favorite because a friend of mine, he was like, I'm going to golf every day. And 2 months later, he sold his golf clubs. And I said, why'd you sell them? He said, I hate golf. It's like, okay. But it is funny because typically and you and me, I think we hang out with the serial entrepreneurs. We think we're done and we think we need a break. And then we get bored and it's like, oh, I'm going to create something new. One of my dear friends, his 77th birthday, he announced to his wife the launch of business number 7.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of 7s all at once. All right.
Yeah. And she said, this better be the last one. And he's like, no promises.
Yeah. Well, he knows himself at that point, it sounds like.
Yeah. So I think it's fascinating. Now, you are a business, you're resident in Nevada. I'm curious. Now, your geography, I'm guessing you work pretty much with US wide, or are you just Nevada? What's your area like for what you do?
Yeah, look, so I'll say this, there's a problem in the MSP industry, particularly with M&A. And the problem is this, right? When we go to, when the deal's done, the ink's dry on the paper, the money's been wired, right? We're telling the staff, right? We're informing them, hey guys, we've got some news, right? We're coming together, right? We're going to our clients. We're telling them the news. Hey, we've joined this other company. We've partnered, or we've been acquired. However it's phrased, right? The problem in the MSP industry is this: when an MSP buys an MSP, at the end of the day, it's still just an MSP. And just to pick one point, from the client's perspective, the client's like, hey, I didn't really have a say in this. I'm just kind of drug along. And a lot of times what happens is they used to have the cell phone number of the owner. They were on a first name basis with the senior, middle, and lower technicians, right? They knew who was coming out. They knew the process. They knew the little workarounds, so they didn't have to put in a ticket, right? The fun little things that clients figured out. All that's going away. And so the client's like, hey, I'm losing all these things, this familiarity, this process that I had, these relationships. What do I get in return? And the problem is, at the end of the day, a lot of times the clients may look at it and they'll say, hey, maybe not in these terms, but what's in it for me?
Yep.
And the problem is when they see that, hey, they're just an MSP and really they're not getting much more, they're kind of like, you know, this is a lot of change and pain for me, and I didn't even sign up for this. I'm going to go and look elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
Now, for the seller, that brings risk, right? They're like, I don't want to lose my clients. They might go shop around. Net at Work is a little bit different, right? It's kind of setting itself apart from the rest of the industry. Having 11 business units, when somebody comes in, we're looking not only across the US, but across North America. The conversations we have, we talk to the people and the staff, we talk to the clients, but as soon as we tell them, hey, we do ERPs, we do HR systems, we do information, CRMs, we do payments, they're like, oh, really? We're actually in the middle of evaluating Sage right now. You mean you can help us with that? Because I don't know about you, as an MSP owner, when my clients came to me and said, hey, Adam, we've outgrown QuickBooks, we need help picking an actual ERP, I was like, I don't even know how to spell ERP. That is not my domain, right? It's a completely different situation. And so, you know, we've actually closed 2 great transactions in the last 6 months here at Net at Work. So it's a very different conversation. I see the difference in the people and the clients to come into a bigger group.
I love that. And I think that's something a lot of people underestimate, is the friction to the customer. Because as you said, if I'm getting something that's either the same or slightly worse, now's my moment to go and look elsewhere before
100%.
the ship sinks.
100%. Yep. And the truth is, it's retention is probably one of the biggest fears, right? And so commonly sellers, the seller today of an MSP is, I have to believe, more educated, more up to speed on what's happening, especially 2 and 3 and 4 years ago. The conversations I have today are very different, right? Like in 2022, 2023, I was doing a ton of educating. Everyone's like, what is M&A really about? Some people didn't even know what it stood for, right? We now have dedicated conferences just to M&A now in our industry. That's how hype it is. And MSP owners are often seeing what's happening, right? They're picking up clients from, you know, kind of quote unquote failed acquisitions in their own regions. And what they're fearful of is having that client lost themselves. So that's where it really becomes important to find what is different, what is a little bit different about an acquirer that sets them apart from the rest of the industry.
I love that. And, you know, it's funny because when Esther worked at Net at Work, I would be like, what exactly do you do? And now I think about it, they do have a presence in Alberta where I live. And that was my one sadness when she moved on, because we were working on doing an event here to bring people together.
She actually ran, and that's something else that's interesting is, you know, we get MSPs love to stay in their lane. I think there's obviously a lot of positives to doing that, right? You get to focus exclusively on what you're doing, become the expert. Esther was running our Alliance partnership, which is a program that Net at Work has where MSPs can leverage the additional services and products of the Net@Work portfolio to kind of bring those services to bear, so they don't, as an example, when a client comes to them and has outgrown QuickBooks or QuickBooks Online, they're not just saying, hey, sorry, you got to go to Google and find an option. I literally remember telling clients that, and I'm sure some of my MSP brothers and sisters have done the same, but instead to have a trusted partner that says, hey, we're actually going to loop you in on some of this revenue and profitability, instead of completely losing it to who knows, right? Maybe introducing a threat now to your relationship with the client. Anyway, we've got over 300 partners, over 100 MSPs today take advantage of that program.
I love it. And I'm going to share a personal story because I wish I'd known you then. I bought a business, and it was a very specialized industry, specialized business. And the IT department, the external IT guy, he built everything very uniquely on a Linux platform.
Oh, this was the internal IT guy.
Well, he was the fractional IT guy. So they brought him in.
Gotcha. Oh, okay.
And for better or worse, he built everything on Linux. But minor detail, he didn't tell anybody, especially me, as we went through the transition. We agreed he'd support me. He'd continue with my business. Minor detail, the 3 busiest months of the year in my business are the 3 months of the year he goes off grid into the mountains.
Oh, boy.
He literally, Grizzly Adams, he's out in the wild, no cell phone, nothing. And imagine my joy the 3rd or 4th day into my busy season, and my entire Linux system fried. It was a power surge.
Oh, no.
And it was amazing because I had all of this data, and I had a fried physical box running an operating system nobody else knew how to use, because at the time everybody was selling the Windows NT and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I actually, in the busiest, craziest time of my year, while taking over a new business, I learned how to set up my own Linux server. And every minute of that, I hated that man in the wild. And he came back and he's like, I'm ready to support you. And I said, I am finding a big company because I cannot trust a lone wolf who goes running off into the wilderness 3 months of the year. So,
yeah, my goodness. What an experience. Yeah.
But to this day, I can I can set up a Linux box if I need to. So,
but it's funny the skills that we pick up along the way. I will say that.
Yeah, it was, I learned to tell the difference between OSs, and I learned how to format hard drives, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Yeah. Literally, I called a dozen local places, and they said, well, if your data wasn't in Linux, we could help you with this. And I'm like, well, I can't change the data, so.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So many of us technicians turned entrepreneurs are still that way, right? We're still very technically minded, analytical, process oriented, dare I say introverted, right? And so it's easy. It tends to be the first place that owners get hung up as they jump back into the weeds, right? And so learning to trust people, letting people fail, especially when clients on the line. I know that was anxiety inducing for me. I wanted things done right the first time, right? I knew how hard those clients were won. I did not want to lose them. But yeah, it's I do, you mentioned a comment earlier about you can kind of see the mindset of the owner and where they're at as they start to kind of pull back, trust, delegate, and kind of break through even the sizes of MSP, right? It's like we can see consistently where the bottlenecks are. You got to kind of build it to 0.5 or 1 million on your own. You just got to, and then at 2 to 3 million, right? Word of mouth marketing will get you to that point, but the churn kind of keeps you stuck. And then you got to come up with consistent marketing, and then you get to 5 million, and that means you got to build a leadership team to get past that, and to get past 10 million, you got to build scalable sales, right? So there's very predictable steps, and an owner, again, if they're the cap, they've got to see themselves as the limiting factor, and they've got to invest in themselves to zoom back.
Well, and I'm fascinated, and it tells me a lot about Net at Work that they had Esther in charge of their partnerships because I think that's the other ugly side of it when a big
Mm,
player like Net at Work can do all these things. A lot of the little players are afraid to play nicely because, well, what if you poach my client, or what if you
yes,
take it away? And my counter to that is always, what if you lose the client because you don't offer the other things? The client's at risk either way. But if you build a partnership with Net at Work, you guys have a reputation. You're going to protect that
correct.
first relationship.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. That even if it's unspoken, and many times it is, when the topic of the alliance partnership comes up, it's like, oh my gosh, that's like letting the fox into the hen house, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's a very real concern. So I like to call out that elephant in the room and basically say, look, our founders were very from the outset of this program, they were explicit. If first off, the client always remains the the client of the MSP. If ever we come up to compete against the business, we will actively step away from that. We want extremely to respect that relationship. What we do ask is, hey, leverage the other services and products of the portfolio. So that has come up on time to time. In fact, I was just at a conference 2 weeks ago having a conversation with an MSP who was in our alliance partnership program, and it came to light that we were competing for the same business, and we said we are going to step away from that, right? And so yeah, so we want to hold that, we want to keep our credibility high, and we know that if we poach even one client, the whole system crumbles. And so we want to
Just
obviously totally agree. Yeah, we want to get ahead and stay ahead of that. And look, I'll say this: the MSP community has been around, I don't know, 20 to 30 years at this point. And I remember literally pulling out the yellow pages or even going online and calling MSPs in other areas of the US, right? Like I had a client in Florida, and I would call up and I found an MSP in Florida to say, hey, I've got a client that's got a branch down there. I need some boots on the ground. We're sending out a replacement firewall. Can you have that? That sort of community support is, I think, something that's very unique in the MSP industry. And that is shaped, it's been shaped by the DNA of who we are, right? That collaboration. And interestingly, as I have spent time in mergers and acquisitions, I am a big fan to say, hey, why does that community level of support and collaboration need to stop? Right? Just because we're now kind of transitioning to a different age of MSP with M&A, I don't think it needs to. I think we can still remain competitive. Personally, I'm an advocate of, hey, if something's not a great opportunity for me, I'm happy to send it to somebody else that might be a better fit, right? Having the alliance partner program is a kind of evidence-based proof of that collaboration that we like to have in the industry. So yeah, again, it's part of who we are as MSP founders and owners, and we like to keep it that way.
I love it, and I think that's the recognition. A lot of people mistakenly think, "Oh, we're competitors," but we are stronger, especially in an industry when we can come together. And
Mhm.
I don't want to be the guy who has to know everything. It's like, okay, for me personally, I consider my network my greatest asset because
Mm,
I'm generally two steps away from a solution at any given point in my life because I reach
mm,
out and say, okay, I have a friend who has this issue. Who do I know? Okay. And if I don't know the right person, somebody I know finds that person. And I think your alliance is well suited for that because it's collaboration between the MSPs and between you and the MSPs.
yeah.
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, well, I think it goes off what you just said, is right. Our network is unique to us, right? Every individual. I'm not talking about network. I'm just talking about us as individuals, right?
Yeah.
We have a reputation. We've got these relationships that we've built over years and decades, and I think every one of us has something there that cannot be taken away from us, right? As long as we maintain our reputation, as long as we maintain our credibility in whatever business or industry we're in, nobody can take that away from us. And I think every business, I know there's even other MSPs that have done other similar programs where they've kind of built a channel program, if you will. And so I think it's just building on, look, at the end of the day, human beings are social animals, right? We like to connect. Some of us might recharge in private. That's myself. I like to be in my little cave
Yes.
as an introvert myself. But we are social. Having that connection, having that human element is important to us. And, at the end of the day, that's what business is about. It's about solving solutions for people and making life better.
I love it. And for what it's worth, you and I can talk about the network and connections all day long. My audience gets it. There are people who
Mm,
don't get it. And we just agree to disagree because to me, I
sure.
can't fathom, there's that myth of I'm a self made man. And it's like nobody is self made,
Yeah.
unless you walked out of the womb on your own, didn't bother with doctors, nurses,
Yeah.
diapers. There's always a family or a community
Yeah.
behind us. And I think what I love about Net at Work, and I've been fascinated since I first met Esther, is you guys live it. This is not some slogan on an office wall. It's the people you guys hire, it's the people you collaborate with. You truly build a community.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Our founders, so we're in our 30th year, kind of a big milestone, but they started in 1996. And interestingly, they are to me kind of the 1% that are a little bit different because they were not in technology. They actually came from the food service and hospitality industries. And they identified back then a problem that frankly still exists today, which is finger pointing, right? And that nobody likes their IT guy sort of mentality from clients. And they said, you know what? We feel we have a good grasp on providing fantastic customer service. And they said, we're going to hire the best people and kind of come into this. Now, the truth is, look, every MSP out there says we have the best service, we have the smartest technicians, we've got the most certifications. And so, it's funny, every now and again at a conference, somebody will say, what sets your MSP apart? And people start shouting things out and maybe they'll list them up on a board. And it's like, guess what? You just described every MSP's marketing out there, right?
Yeah.
We're all saying the same thing. But, the truth is, it comes down, I think, to the relationships, right? And when we forge those relationships, especially when a client has a big challenge and we kind of win the day for them, that's what matters, right? They're going to come back to us because there's trust.
And honestly, I can't imagine, first of all, a 30-year tech company, that's quite the legacy. But right now, I can't even fathom as a single smaller MSP trying to be on top of all of the different tools, knowing when, and again, a lot of the MSPs I've met, they're all fabulous humans. But when a client comes and says, I think I need an ERP, the first answer is no, you don't. Stay with what you got. And it's not that they're malicious, it's just they don't know what they don't know. And so I think being part of a network where you can say, I've got clients asking about CRMs, ERPs. I'm the security guy. You want to talk about locking down a network, I'm that guy.
Yeah. Well, look, I think frankly, I do agree with you. I think to the credit of most MSP owners, I think we're also much better now at understanding where our strengths and weaknesses lie, right? And so bringing in trusted advisors or helping seek those people out. But there's also something else you mentioned, and it's probably safe to say at this point the MSP industry is on, like, I don't know, 3.0 or 4.0, right? Initially it was IT break fix, right? And then the whole recurring idea came around. And then we're like, oh, hey, let's go into cloud, right? That was maybe MSP 2.0. And then cybersecurity is now very hot. And now the big one, AI, right? I've now been to a couple of conferences, 2 conferences just over the last 2 weeks, and I was walking around the vendor area intentionally looking at all the marketing of the vendors, and every one of them is jumping on the bandwagon, AI this and AI that. And I'm just like, ugh, kind of sick of and tired of hearing about it, which literally left the conference. I'm waiting at the airport, and on the TV, CNN's running about AI and how everyone's sick and tired of hearing about it, but it's here in our face. Truth is, today, MSP owners, I go to these conferences, Jeff, and I see 2 things: bald heads and gray hair. And a lot of them, frankly, are like, I'm done with change. I am sick of this leveling up to the next MSP
Yeah.
4.0 AI. They can have it. I am done. I'm ready to get out, because it's a big thing, right? It's going to be changing. It's probably the, well, some people are saying it's the most universal threat to entire business probably since the Industrial Revolution, right? It has that capacity. Some people may argue yes or no, but for an MSP, how is a smaller MSP going to compete with a larger MSP that can take advantage of the lower costs, right? Maybe even outsourced help desk. There's already MSPs today that are using AI systems to, clients will phone in, resolve level 1 and level 2 issues without a person even having to get involved, but the client is still satisfied, right?
Yes.
That is a game changer. How does a smaller MSP compete? So it's a very interesting inflection point for owners. What's their, how much gas do they have in the tank, right? Are they
Yeah.
excited about this technology? Some of them yes, some of them no.
It's fascinating to me because I'm a bit of a knowledge nerd, and I can't remember his name, but there's an individual who, somewhere around the 1870s, he's notorious for being the last human to know everything about every field of study available at that time, because knowledge exploded. And I can't imagine, like, you look at the world of AI and it has exploded. Things change by the minute, if not the
Yeah.
second. I can't imagine being that poor generalist going, holy, I'm trying to keep up and stay current. I
Yeah.
think we're going to see more partnerships and more collaborations.
Mm-hmm.
We won't even get into the terror I feel when I hear about shadow AI, and when people talk about their vibe coding, I'm like, I'm going to short sell your company because I feel like there's going to be a security breach.
Yeah. Well, look, the truth is, regardless of how we feel about AI, it's safe to say MSP clients, those businesses are also thinking about it, right? And
Yeah.
they are going to seek education. They're going to seek answers, and they're going to get it from someone, right? The fear is, do they get it from us or do they get it from our competitors, right?
Yeah.
And try as we might to kind of hold back the wave of AI of like, hey, it's super early, let's just wait. Like, the truth is, client demand is going to increase for these sort of solutions, and we as providers have to be in a place where we can confidently bring those things to the table. And so it's having the right talent on our own team, right? Who internally is excited about it, but not just excited, but is actually going to drive, right, initiatives and bring solutions and packages to the table that aren't just kind of bolted together, right? Because at the end of the day, again, we fought hard to get these clients in the door. We want to keep them happy. We want there to be a proven value, right? That they just didn't sign up to AI just to check a box. They want return, right? The owners and investors of our clients want those things to come to fruition. And yeah, so there's a lot of pressure. And I think we're going to see maybe more and more of a disparity between those who have and those who have not. And M&A, although it's commonly thought of as a financial play, getting the talent of those groups into a
Yes.
larger organization, that's another angle that some people don't think about, that is really becoming a big driver.
We're going to have an entirely new episode just on talent acquisition as a strategy, because there are some professions where it's not a question of if AI is taking over. It's a question of, we can't get the young people in. AI
Yeah.
better fill this gap and quickly. So
Yeah. You talk about young people. I personally, that's probably one of my bigger worries is, maybe this is too in the weeds, but if we get rid of our help desk, if AI becomes our help desk, right? How do new people come into this industry, right? That's where we learned, right? I was the junior systems specialist when I graduated right out of high school, right? I got right
yeah.
into IT. That's how MSPs are. You start as a level 1, you become a level 2, you become a level 3. But if we are getting rid of that level 1, I worry about the future of our industry. So maybe I'm projecting too far down the line, but it's some things I think about.
Well, I have two boys. One's in high school, one's in junior high, and my wife is very obsessed with what their careers are going to look like. And I'm like, all
Mm,
I can say right now is I don't know what it's going to look like. They better learn how to learn, and they better learn how to communicate. And other than that, I'm not betting on any skill because,
love
between
it.
you and me, my high school student is learning Python. And I'm like, I don't know that there's a career path there 5 years from now.
Mm,
I
yeah.
hope
Yeah.
so, but I don't. And as
Yeah.
you were saying, all of us at some point, we cut our teeth on small problems that we learn to solve bigger problems. If we're not giving those to the next generation, it's our fault
Mhm.
if they don't know how to solve problems.
Yeah. I would agree. I love that. Learning how to learn and learning how to communicate. Um, I love that. I think those are two sharp edges that could empower anybody. And I will say, with the people I talk to, it's what once you kind of hear the reasons behind why, then you're like, oh, that makes sense. But I'll tell you who is not taking over the helm of most MSPs are the children of the MSP owners. And it's because they saw the stress that their mothers and fathers went through running the business.
Yeah.
And you know what the kids are saying? No way, not me. So it's exceptionally rare where I truly see it being passed on to the next generation. I
Yeah.
think there's probably some disappointment there, because who doesn't love the idea of a good legacy story?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's becoming less and less.
Well, it's funny. In our family, the legacy is they're going to be part of the family business. There's no question of that. But each
Mhm.
of them has to build their own path.
Ah,
So it was funny for me, and it sounds a little early, but my 17-year-old, his vision is, he doesn't want to go down a path and get 4 years of university and end up in deep debt,
mm.
when maybe he could build a business and use that business to pay for college. And I'm like, I can't argue with that.
Oh, totally agree. Yeah, and
So
it's. I mean, you hear the Mark Zuckerberg and the Bill Gates stories about starting, and it's the truth is there's a lot of ways to make life happen and
yeah,
eke out, kind of a financial security for ourselves. And I think that's the beauty of AI and technology. I mean, we've been talking now for the last couple of minutes about the negative sides of it that may be coming down the pipe, but I think the creativity and the new options that it is opening up for people it's further spreading the ability of people to access information, right?
I
Um,
love that.
so yeah,
Now, Adam, I could talk to you all day, so which clearly means we need to do this again sometime, but I want to be mindful of your time.
agreed.
Where can people go to connect with you or learn a little bit more about what you do or Net at Work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think LinkedIn, right? I've got my email, cell phone number listed on my LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me through any of those: call, text, email, and then also as well as Net at Work at netatwork.com. We've also got our LinkedIn pages there. And I will say, on the personal side, I still compete in powerlifting, believe it or not. I am preparing right now for the USPA Powerlifting National Championship. It's in 6 weeks, and so every now and again I'll post once I do compete, because it's something that kind of my M&A journey allowed me to really start competing, and it's a bit of my passion, so I like to share it.
I love it, and I'll be there cheering you on in spirit. So,
Thank
Adam,
you,
thank you for taking the time to hang out with me today.
Jeff. Fantastic, and thank you, viewers.